It was supposed to be a love story that felt almost too perfect to be real. The kind that begins under bright lights, in front of millions, and somehow still manages to stay genuine long after the camera stopped rolling. When Trista Sutter first stepped into the spotlight as the very first lead of The Bachelorette, no one knew what would happen. There were no guarantees, no proven formula, just hope, nerves, and a leap of faith. And then came Ryan Sutter. From the moment he appeared, there was something different about him. Calm, grounded, quietly confident, the kind of presence that didn't need to compete for attention. While others tried to impress, Ryan simply was. And somehow, that was exactly what Trista needed. Their connection didn't feel rushed or forced. It grew naturally, like two people who didn't just want love, but understood what it meant to keep it. And when the final rose was handed out, it wasn't just a TV moment. It felt like the beginning of something real. Years passed, and unlike so many reality TV romances, theirs didn't fade. It deepened. Marriage, children, family life, they built something steady, something lasting. Fans watched from afar, often pointing to them as proof that love stories from television could actually survive the real world. But life has a way of testing even the strongest bonds. At first, it was subtle, small changes, a little less energy, a few unexplained bad days. The kind of things most people brush off, thinking it's just stress or fatigue. But for Ryan, those days didn't just pass, they lingered. And then they started coming more often. There's a quiet frustration that comes with not understanding your own body. Imagine waking up and not feeling like yourself and not knowing why. Imagine trying to explain it to others when you can't even explain it to yourself. Eventually, the answer came: Lyme disease. For many, a diagnosis brings relief. Finally, a name for what you're going through. But it also brings something heavier, the realization that this isn't something that disappears overnight. It's something you live with, something unpredictable. And for Ryan, that unpredictability became part of his everyday life. Some days were manageable, others weren't. There's a certain kind of exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix, a kind of frustration that builds slowly, quietly, until it becomes impossible to ignore. And while Ryan has always been someone who pushes through, even the strongest people have moments where pushing feels harder. Still, through all of it, one thing never changed: Trista. She wasn't just there for the good days, she stayed through the uncertain ones, the exhausting ones, the days when things didn't make sense. And somehow they found ways to hold on to their connection, even when everything else felt unstable. There's something quietly powerful about a love that doesn't disappear when things get difficult. Not dramatic, not loud, just steady. And yet, even with that support, Ryan began to understand something he never had before. Before his illness, certain struggles felt distant to him, hard to fully grasp, the kind of pain you can sympathize with, but not truly feel. But living with a chronic condition changed that perspective in a way he never expected. He began to understand the weight that some people carry every day, not because he wanted to, not because he went looking for it, but because certain experiences force you to see the world differently. There are moments, especially on the hardest days, when frustration builds into something deeper, when the idea of feeling the same way forever feels overwhelming. When the thought of being a burden crosses your mind, not because it's true, but because the feeling is so heavy. Ryan made it clear that he never reached a point where he wanted to give up, but he did reach a point where he could understand how someone might feel that way. And that understanding changed him. It gave him a deeper sense of empathy, a quieter awareness of what others might be going through behind closed doors. Because not every struggle is visible, not every battle is obvious. Sometimes the strongest people are the ones fighting the hardest battles no one else can see. But here's where Ryan's story takes a different turn. because instead of letting those thoughts define him, he learned how to recognize the early signs, the moments when a bad day starts to become something more. And instead of ignoring them, he started facing them. Not perfectly, not easily, but intentionally. He found ways to ground himself, to remind himself that a bad day doesn't mean a bad life, that feelings, no matter how intense, can pass, that tomorrow doesn't have to look like today. And through it all, there were still moments of laughter. Because even in difficult times, life doesn't lose all its light. There are still small, unexpected moments that break through, the kind that remind you that things aren't as heavy as they feel. A joke shared at the right time, a quiet moment with family, a memory that brings a smile when it's needed most. Ryan and Trista didn't just survive this chapter, they continued to live through it. Not perfectly polished, not picture-perfect every day, but real. And maybe that's what makes their story even more powerful now than it was in the beginning, because it's no longer just about falling in love under perfect circumstances. It's about staying in love when things aren't. It's about showing up for each other when life gets complicated, about choosing connection even on the days when everything feels off balance. And for fans who have followed their journey from the very start, this chapter feels different, more personal, more human. Because it's not just a love story anymore. It's a story about resilience, about learning things you never expected to understand, about growing in ways you didn't choose, but still finding meaning in the process. And maybe, in some quiet way, it's also a reminder that everyone is carrying something, that kindness matters more than we realize, that love, real love, isn't just about the happy moments we see, but the difficult ones we don't. So if there's one thing to take away from Ryan's journey, it's this. Strength doesn't always look like pushing forward without struggle. Sometimes it looks like acknowledging the struggle and choosing to keep going anyway. And as their story continues, one thing is certain. This isn't the ending anyone expected, but it might just be the chapter that shows who they really are. If this story moved you or made you see things a little differently, don't forget to share your thoughts, because sometimes the conversations we start can make more of a difference than we realize.
As their journey continues, something quietly shifts, not just in how they face challenges, but in how they see each other. Because when life slows you down, when it forces you to pause, you begin to notice things you might have missed before. The little moments. The way Trista Sutter checks in without making it obvious. The way she can read Ryan's mood without him saying a word. The way she brings lightness into a room that feels heavy, sometimes with nothing more than a smile or a perfectly timed joke. And Ryan, he notices all of it. There's something deeply romantic about being truly seen, especially during the hardest chapters of your life. Not just for your strengths, but for your struggles too, and still being loved exactly the same, if not more. For Ryan Sutter, that realization becomes a turning point. Because while illness can take a lot, it can also reveal things you never fully appreciated before. Like patience, like presence, like the kind of love that doesn't need grand gestures to prove itself. There are days when Ryan still doesn't feel like himself. Days when even simple things feel heavier than they should. But instead of fighting those days the way he used to, he's learning something new. How to move with them instead of against them. And somehow that makes a difference. Not a dramatic, overnight transformation, but a subtle one. The kind that builds over time. The kind that turns survival into something that feels a little more like living again. And through it all, their relationship continues to evolve. They laugh more about the small things now, not because everything is easy, but because they've learned that sometimes laughter is the only way through. There are moments when Trista teases Ryan just enough to pull him out of his thoughts, moments when he rolls his eyes but can't help smiling anyway. It's playful, it's real, it's the kind of connection that only grows stronger with time. And in those moments, the weight lifts just a little. Family life, too, takes on a deeper meaning. It's no longer about routines or schedules or doing everything perfectly. It's about being present, about appreciating the now even when it's messy or unpredictable. Because when you've faced uncertainty, even the simplest days start to feel like something worth holding on to. And maybe that's one of the most unexpected parts of Ryan's journey. It didn't just change how he sees struggle, it changed how he sees everything. The good days feel richer, the ordinary moments feel more meaningful, and the love he shares with Trista feels even more solid than before. But that doesn't mean everything is easy now. There are still questions, still moments of doubt, still days when the road ahead feels unclear. And yet, instead of letting those moments take over, Ryan has started to approach them differently. He talks about them. He opens up. Not in a way that seeks attention, but in a way that creates understanding. Because if there's one thing he's learned, it's that silence can make things feel heavier, but sharing, even a little, can make them feel lighter. And for many people watching from the outside, that honesty matters more than they might realize. Because it reminds them that they're not alone, that it's okay to have hard days, that understanding doesn't always come from having the same experience, but from being willing to listen. Ryan's perspective continues to grow in ways he never expected. What once felt impossible to understand now feels human. Not something to judge, not something to fear, but something to approach with compassion. And that shift in itself becomes a quiet form of strength. Meanwhile, Trista remains exactly what she's always been. Not just a partner, but a steady presence. The kind of person who doesn't need recognition for what she does because she's not doing it for anyone else to see. She's doing it because that's who she is. And in many ways, their story comes full circle. Because the same qualities that brought them together in the beginning, the sincerity, the depth, the quiet strength, are the same ones carrying them through now. Only now, they're stronger, more tested, more real. And maybe that's what makes their story so compelling. It's not just about love found in a fairy tale setting. It's about love that continues long after the fairy tale ends. Love that adapts. Love that holds steady. Love that grows even in the face of uncertainty. And as their journey moves forward, one thing becomes clear. This chapter isn't about what they've lost. It's about what they've discovered, about resilience, about connection, about the kind of love that doesn't just survive difficult times, but becomes deeper because of them. And maybe, just maybe, that's the kind of story people need to hear the most right now. So as you watch their journey unfold, there's something worth thinking about. What does it really mean to stand by someone? Not just when it's easy, but when it's not. Because sometimes the strongest relationships aren't the ones that avoid challenges. They're the ones that face them together and come out stronger on the other side. And in a world where so much feels uncertain, that kind of love,
Just when it feels like they've found a rhythm, something steady, something they can rely on, life gently reminds them that healing isn't a straight line. There are still those unpredictable mornings, the kind where Ryan Sutter wakes up unsure of what the day will bring. Some days start with energy, with hope, and then slowly shift into something heavier. Other days begin quietly, almost fragile, like he has to move carefully just to keep everything balanced. But here's what's different now. He doesn't face those mornings alone, because before he even says a word, Trista Sutter already knows. It's in the way she looks at him, the way she pauses just for a second longer than usual, the way she chooses her words, not to fix things, but to be there. And sometimes that's all that's needed. Not solutions, not perfect answers, just presence. There's a quiet kind of comfort in knowing that someone isn't going anywhere, even when things feel uncertain. And over time, that comfort becomes something Ryan leans on more than he ever expected. Not as a crutch, but as a reminder. A reminder that even on the hardest days, there's still something steady to hold on to. And slowly, almost without realizing it, Ryan begins to rediscover parts of himself that felt distant for a while. His sense of humor comes back in little flashes. A quick comment here, a playful tease there. moments that catch Trista off guard in the best way. Because even in the middle of everything, he hasn't lost who he is. He's just learning how to be that person again in a slightly different way. And Trista notices. She sees it in the small victories. The days when he chooses to step outside even when it's hard. The moments when he laughs a little louder than the day before. The quiet determination that shows up even when no one else is watching. And instead of making a big deal out of it, she meets those moments with something simple. Pride. The kind that doesn't need to be spoken out loud, but is felt in every glance, every smile, every bit of encouragement she gives. And in return, Ryan begins to see something just as clearly. How strong she really is. Not in a dramatic, attention-grabbing way, but in the way she shows up over and over again without hesitation. In the way she carries both the light and the heavy parts of their life without ever making it feel like a burden. In the way she somehow keeps their world feeling warm even when things get difficult. And there's a moment, quiet, almost easy to miss, where it all clicks for him. This isn't just about getting through a tough time. This is about who they are becoming because of it. Because challenges don't just test relationships, they reveal them. And what Ryan and Trista have isn't something that disappears under pressure. If anything, it becomes more defined, more intentional, more real. They start creating new routines, not out of necessity, but out of understanding. Slower mornings, more intentional time together. Less focus on what they should be doing, and more focus on what actually feels right for them. And in that shift, something unexpected happens. Life feels a little lighter. Not because the challenges are gone, but because they're no longer carrying them the same way. There's more space now, more room for laughter, more room for connection, more room for those small, beautiful moments that might have once been overlooked. Like sitting together without saying much, but feeling completely understood. Like sharing a look across the room that says everything without needing words. Like realizing that even after everything, they still choose each other every single day. And maybe that's the most powerful part of their story. It's not about perfection. It's not about having all the answers. It's about choosing love even when things are uncertain. And as time goes on, Ryan continues to open up, not just about the struggles, but about what he's learned through them, about patience, about perspective, about how sometimes the hardest experiences can quietly reshape the way you see the world. He speaks with more depth now, not because he wants to inspire, but because he understands. And that understanding reaches people in a way nothing else can. Because it's real, because it's honest, because it comes from a place that isn't trying to impress, just trying to connect. And for those listening, watching, following their journey, it becomes more than just a story. It becomes something they can relate to, something they can feel, something that reminds them that even in difficult seasons, there's still room for growth, for connection, for hope. And as for Ryan and Trista, their story keeps moving forward, not in big dramatic leaps, but in steady, meaningful steps, the kind that don't always get noticed right away, but matter the most in the long run. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about a diagnosis. It's not just about hard days or heavy moments. It's about what happens in between all of that. The love that holds everything together, the strength that builds quietly over time, the choice to keep going together. And maybe, just maybe, that's what makes their story unforgettable.